Silence breaks them before it ever breaks you. You can feel it, that heavy calm that follows when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop chasing answers, when you finally let silence do what words never could. People think silence is weakness, that it's surrender. But silence, when held with power, becomes judgment. It becomes truth. This isn't about ignoring someone. It's about revealing them. Because when you stop talking, pretending, fixing, apologizing, their mask begins to crack. You don't have to say a word. Time, absence, and peace do the speaking for you. And what they feel in that quiet is exposure. They thought silence meant control, that by disappearing they could decide when connection begins and when it ends. But when you don't break it, the rules change. The energy flips. The one who used to walk away suddenly starts waiting. The calm they once wore like armor starts pressing against their own chest. That's what this story is about. The invisible shift that happens when silence stops being fear and becomes power. When you hold it not as punishment, but as discipline. When you realize that every time you stay quiet, you're not losing connection. You're regaining control. Silence doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, it doesn't prove, it teaches. It shows who needs attention to feel worthy and who finds worth in self-respect. When you stop reacting, you stop feeding illusion. And the moment you do, they begin to feel everything they once made you feel. Uncertainty, confusion, loss of control. That's the power of absence. In Stoic philosophy, power isn't loud. It's not about who speaks last. It's about who no longer needs to. Stoicism teaches that strength isn't proven through reaction, but through restraint, through emotional control, through calm that drives others mad because they can't shake it, can't read it, can't manipulate it. You'll see what they really feel when you don't break the silence. The regret, the obsession, the quiet ego collapse behind every "I don't care." Silence exposes truth faster than confrontation ever could, because no one escapes the reflection of stillness. And if this message hits you, if you've been holding your voice, fighting the impulse to explain, learning to choose peace over panic, know this: your silence isn't empty, it's sacred, it's the beginning of your freedom. This channel exists for that kind of strength. The quiet kind. The Stoic mindset that doesn't need validation to feel powerful. Every story here helps you sharpen that calm, to strengthen the discipline that separates chaos from clarity. If you want to help keep these reflections alive, for those still learning how to stay silent with purpose, tap the super thanks below. It's not charity, it's alignment. A way to support the message you already live. Power doesn't shout, it breathes quietly. Because the truth is simple. The moment you stop breaking the silence, everything changes. They stop feeling in control, they start feeling exposed, and you finally feel free. You think they love the silence. You've seen them vanish. Cold eyes, unread messages, that effortless calm that feels untouchable. It looks like power, like Stoicism, but it isn't. It's control, a shield protecting a fragile core they'll never admit exists. They mastered strategic silence long before you did. They learned to leave conversations half-finished, to disappear right when things start to feel real. It's their way of saying, I decide when this matters. And you believed it. You mistook distance for peace and emotional detachment for strength. But everything changes when you stop chasing. When you don't break the silence, the balance flips. The same stillness they used as armor starts echoing back at them. Silence becomes a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. In that quiet, they're forced to face what they've spent years avoiding. The power of absence exposes the illusion. Their so-called self-mastery was never peace. It was fear disguised as discipline. And now, for the first time, they can't escape it. At first, they act unbothered. They scroll, they post, they stay busy. They convince themselves they're fine, detached above it all. They keep repeating the same detachment strategy, the cold response, the emotional distance, the illusion of calm they've sold to everyone. But deep down they feel it, that strange discomfort that grows in silence they can't control. Because when silence is real, it doesn't protect, it reveals. It unmasks the cracks beneath the stoic image they project. And the longer you stay quiet, the louder those cracks echo. They start remembering every word they didn't say, every emotion they buried under the illusion of composure. You've done nothing, yet they begin to unravel. That's the irony. The silent power isn't in doing more, it's in stopping. In not explaining, not chasing, not fixing what was built on imbalance. When you let the silence breathe, you shift the entire power dynamic. Their thoughts begin to loop. Did I go too far? Are they angry? Have they moved on? It's the birth of regret psychology, though they'd never call it that. They start to feel the weight of what they thought they wanted, freedom, and realize how empty it is without connection. Control begins to crumble. That's the quiet revenge of silence. You don't shout, block, or threaten. You just hold your ground. You master your reactions. And as you do, something deeper happens. You become what they only pretended to be: calm, composed, truly detached. They once used silence to manipulate emotion. You now use it to master your own. That's the difference between psychological power and emotional manipulation. One hides weakness, the other transforms it into strength. Days pass. They expected you to reset the pattern, to prove you still care, but you don't. You've learned the discipline of patience, the emotional resilience to stay still while your mind screams for movement. And in that stillness, something shifts. Not in them, but in you. You start to feel peace, real peace, the kind that doesn't depend on validation. You begin to understand what Stoic wisdom truly means, that silent dominance isn't about control over others, it's control over yourself. Meanwhile, their calm unravels. The ego trembles, the thoughts spiral, the stillness turns against them. That's where ego collapse begins, quietly, invisibly. The silence that once protected them now exposes them. You've done nothing, and yet everything has changed. Because silence isn't emptiness, it's truth. And when truth surfaces, control breaks. They always believed silence was their weapon, that by stepping back first, they could decide when closeness began and when it ended. Their confidence lived off your reactions. Every message, every attempt to understand them was proof they still held power. But now, you've flipped the script. When you stop reaching out, they lose that invisible grip. What once felt like psychological control becomes a mirror they can't escape. The distance they used to manage turns into emotional distance they can't bear. The silence they once commanded begins whispering what they've avoided all along. People like that don't use silence for peace, they use it for dominance. It's emotional chess disguised as calm. When they pull away, they expect you to panic, to chase, to prove devotion. That's how they measure worth, by the noise you make when they go quiet. But this time your silence doesn't play their game. It confuses them, because silence without reaction feels different. It's not defensive, it's not manipulative, it's steady, the kind that carries inner strength. At first, they underestimate it. They tell themselves you'll come back, that you're just giving them what they asked for in space. They still believe the pattern holds, but day by day their illusion of control fades. The absence grows louder. They check their phone, refreshing messages they'll never send. Their mind turns into quiet interrogation. Why aren't they breaking the silence? Did I lose them? Did I matter at all? It's not regret yet, it's confusion. Their reality no longer matches their expectation. That's how regret begins, not with guilt, but with dissonance. The mind that once felt secure now questions its own version of events. They replay conversations, searching for the moment they lost control. But silence gives them nothing back. It's not a debate they can win, it's an echo they can't escape. And what they don't realize is that your silence isn't passive. It's a message, a boundary, a declaration of self-mastery. You're not punishing them, you're protecting your peace. It's not revenge, it's liberation. That's the paradox. The quieter you become, the louder their chaos grows. Every calm hour from you becomes noise inside them. That's the mystery effect. They start overthinking, trying to decode your silence. Have you moved on? Are you angry? Are you done? The absence gives their fears a voice. You, on the other hand, move differently now. You've stopped fighting for clarity from someone who thrives on confusion. You understand that peace doesn't come from explaining. It comes from emotional control. You've realized silence isn't the absence of communication. It's its purest, most precise form. They feel the shift. The power of absence turns against them. What once made them look untouchable now reveals their weakness. Silence only feels powerful when someone else breaks it first. When no one does, it becomes unbearable. So they start testing the waters, a reaction on your story. A casual, "Hey, how have you been?" Each attempt is a quiet probe, a way to see if they still hold the narrative. But your cold response, or no response at all, tells them what they never expected. They're no longer the center of your calm. That's the real reversal. You've taken what they thought was a weapon and turned it into armor. That's quiet revenge. Not loud, not cruel, just undeniable. The Stoic mindset doesn't explain. It observes. And in silence, the illusion collapses. Because silence carries two meanings. One for the weak, one for the strong. For them, it's avoidance. For you, it's transformation. What they used as escape, you've turned into evolution. While they rebuild their illusion, scrolling through your shadow and replaying what they lost, you've already outgrown the noise. The distance they once used as protection has become your sanctuary. They'll call it coldness. They'll call it pride. But it's not. It's peace. The kind that comes when you stop fighting for someone who confuses attention with love. And as silence stretches further, the balance tilts again. This time, not in their favor. Something deeper begins to move beneath the surface. They start to feel it, that quiet truth that silence no longer shields them. It exposes them. At first, they remain calm. Your silence doesn't scare them. It feeds their ego. They'll come back, they tell themselves. They always do. But then, days pass, then weeks. And the peace they felt begins to feel like pressure. That's when they start rationalizing. They replay every conversation, trying to find the point where things began to freeze. They check your profile, scroll through your pictures, hover over the message box, and stop. Pride holds their hand back. That's the war they never trained for, ego versus fear. The same silence they used to punish others now punishes them. Silence has a way of turning on those who abuse it. It's not quick, it's psychological. It doesn't explode, it seeps in. It begins as curiosity, turns into unease, and ends in obsession. That's regret psychology unfolding. They wanted distance, but now that they have it, they don't know what to do with it. You can almost see it, them lying awake staring at the phone that won't light up. Their mind invents stories. Maybe you're angry, maybe you've moved on, maybe you're doing this on purpose. That's how emotional control feels from the outside. It burns. The silence becomes a room they can't escape. And here's the irony. The same calm expression they once wore begins to crack. They still post, still perform composure, but their eyes betray them. The mask of Stoicism no longer fits, because this isn't peace, it's exposure. The power of absence now reflects every emotion they tried to bury. What they called strength was really avoidance, and your silence forces them to feel it all. Every repressed emotion resurfaces: guilt, confusion, helplessness. This is ego collapse in its purest form. No words, no confrontation. Just stillness revealing truth. Meanwhile, you feel something else entirely. You're not chasing, not explaining, not begging to be understood. You're finally breathing. That's self-mastery, control over your own reactions. You've stopped teaching lessons. You're simply living them. This is where the power dynamics shift for good. They once decided when connection started and ended. Now you do. Your silence isn't a wound anymore, it's a choice. You've learned that the most strategic silence says, "I'm not playing this game anymore." They can feel it. Even without words, they sense the energy change. It's not anger, it's detachment. And that's what makes it so powerful. Because detachment can't be negotiated. You can argue with noise, but never with silence that's truly at peace. That's the mystery effect. It keeps them restless. In their world, control meant dominance. In yours, silence means freedom. You've broken the pattern without breaking a word, and they can't bear it. Their thoughts turn against them. Every confident phrase now sounds hollow. Every excuse echoes unanswered. That's when the first crack becomes a collapse. They scroll through old messages, searching for the version of you that begged, explained, or chased. But that version doesn't exist anymore. Silence buried it, and yet they can't name what they're feeling. It's not heartbreak, it's disorientation. It's what happens when psychological power leaves the one who abused it. That quiet realization that they no longer have access to your emotions, that your peace no longer depends on their chaos. You've reversed the silence without saying a word. You've shown that stillness can be louder than confrontation, colder than revenge, sharper than any response. You've proven that silence, when mastered, isn't surrender. It's control. And as they sit there, drowning in the same stillness they once used as a weapon, it dawns on them. The silence that protected their ego is the same silence now breaking it. They don't notice it at first. The tiny ways control begins to slip. It starts with hesitation, a glance at your last conversation, a message typed, deleted, retyped, deleted again. Silence once made them feel powerful. Now it makes them feel exposed. The strategic silence they once commanded no longer obeys them. In their mind, the rules were clear. They disappear, you chase. They pull away, you close the distance. It was predictable, safe. But this time, nothing, no reaction, no emotional rescue. You let the silence breathe, and that calm, steady pause becomes the sound of their ego collapse. They feel it in random moments. Driving, showering, pretending to focus. Every quiet second turns into a question they can't answer. Why aren't they reaching out? Did I lose them? Were they serious when they said they were done? The silence becomes a haunting rhythm they can't escape. That's when power dynamics reverse completely. For so long, they thrived on caring less. Now they're the ones watching your shadow, the obsession after silence taking form. Every post, every absence, every unreturned word becomes proof that they've lost control. They tell themselves stories to survive. They're just busy. They'll come back eventually. But deep down, they know. This silence feels different. Yours doesn't carry bitterness, it carries emotional control. And that's what makes it untouchable. You're not playing the game, you've erased the board. And that terrifies them. Because without noise, they can't read you. Without reaction, they can't predict you. Their sense of dominance fed on your emotional transparency. Every message, every sigh, every "Are you okay?" was proof they still mattered. But now there's nothing, just stillness. That's the cruel beauty of Stoicism when it's real. It's not coldness, it's clarity. Your stillness doesn't come from apathy, it comes from peace. You've learned to sit with discomfort instead of controlling it, and in doing so, you've become unplayable. They feel that shift. It's not silence from anger, it's silence from self-mastery. And that's why it stings. Because anger invites conflict, peace ends it. And they can't handle endings they don't control. You've shifted the gravity. They now orbit around your stillness, pulled by a force they can't name. It's not manipulation, it's nature. Silence attracts noise. Stillness exposes chaos. You've simply stopped being the echo. Inside them, pride and panic collide. Pride whispers, "Don't text." Panic screams, "What if it's too late?" It's a war between ego and vulnerability, and silence is the battlefield. You don't need to lift a finger. You've already won the psychological war by not reacting. That's the quiet revenge few ever master. The kind that doesn't destroy but reveals, not with words but with absence. You're showing what emotional detachment truly means, not avoidance but freedom. The freedom to walk away from what drains your peace. They start reframing it. "They're just trying to hurt me," they say. It's easier to believe you're being cruel than to admit they've been outgrown. It's easier to blame manipulation than to face regret psychology. Because regret demands reflection, and reflection demands truth. And truth is the one thing silence never hides. It exposes every motive, every insecurity, every false sense of strength. The more they resist it, the louder it becomes. Silence doesn't fade, it amplifies. You can almost see it, that invisible moment when their certainty dissolves into doubt. Not loud, not dramatic, just a tiny fracture in the mask. That's the instant control dies, and the longer you remain still, the wider that fracture grows. They wanted distance, not disconnection. They wanted silence, but not yours. Because your silence carries what theirs never did. The power of absence. A presence so strong it speaks louder than words. They used silence to escape. You use it to master. They ran from emotion. You own it. That's the difference between fear and discipline, between manipulation and wisdom. And now, As they scroll through a chat that no longer moves, they feel it, that heavy stillness pressing on their chest. The silence they once built their confidence on has turned against them. It starts small, a story view that lingers, a like on an old post, a meaningless emoji that means everything. They're testing you, trying to see if your silence has an edge or if you've simply moved on. That's the power of silence. It makes them question every move they make. For them, silence used to mean safety. They could vanish, wait, and return whenever it suited them. But now every second of your emotional distance feels like a wall they can't climb. The detachment strategy they once mastered has become their prison. The more they wait, the heavier it feels. So they throw breadcrumbs, a vague "hey," a nostalgic memory, a casual joke pretending nothing happened. But behind every gesture hides one desperate question. Is the door still open? They want reassurance without responsibility, connection without vulnerability. Yet your cold response, or continued silence, gives them none. That's when frustration takes hold. Pride wrestles with panic. How dare they ignore me, they think. I'm the one who's supposed to disappear. The power dynamics collapse in slow motion. They act calm, but inside, chaos blooms. The silent power they once held now belongs to you, not because you seized it, but because you stopped giving yours away. It's strange how silence flips everything. For them, it becomes noise. For you, serenity. They scroll through your feed, reading meaning into every absence. Your stillness online feels like a statement. They imagine you laughing somewhere, lighter, detached, untouched. That image burns. That's regret psychology at work. They wanted to win the distance, but not live with it. You've become the mystery now, and mystery is magnetic. That's the mystery effect they can't resist. When you don't explain, people start explaining for you. Their mind fills the gaps with fear, jealousy, or longing. They imagine someone else giving you the peace they couldn't, and that thought consumes them. You remain composed. Stoicism isn't indifference, it's control. You're not suppressing emotion, you're directing it. That's emotional intelligence, and knowing that noise only disrupts balance. The silence you hold now isn't defense, it's design. It's power disguised as calm. They mistake your stillness for calculation. And in a way, they're right. This silent strategy was never manipulation. It's mastery. You're teaching them what consequence feels like, not through punishment, but reflection. Silence has become their teacher now. And the lesson is brutal. Attention is never owed. As hours turn into days, they start to slip. The mask of composure begins to crack. They might post something indirect, emotional, pretending not to care. But silence amplifies truth. The louder they pretend, the clearer their insecurity sounds. You observe without reacting. That's discipline, the essence of Stoic wisdom. You've realized that every time you resist the urge to respond, you reclaim energy once wasted on chaos. Silence isn't a wall. It's a filter. It keeps the noise out so you can hear yourself again. And that's when real fear sets in, the realization that you might actually be gone, that you found something they never could, peace in detachment. The power of absence begins to sink in, because absence, when intentional, carries weight. It forces reflection. It reveals worth. They feel that weight now. The same silence they once weaponized has turned against them. They don't know it yet, but what's coming next isn't silence anymore, it's consequence. Because silence doesn't just create distance, it creates accountability. And once you stop playing their game, they're left with one unbearable question echoing in their mind. What if the silence never breaks? At first, silence was survival. You used it to stop the bleeding. But somewhere along the way it evolved. The quiet that once felt heavy now feels clean. What started as protection became discipline. You're not reacting anymore, you're refining. That's when silence transforms from pain into power of absence. You start to notice how calm feels, how rare it is. The space that used to ache now breathes. Every unanswered message, every restrained impulse, every time you chose not to explain, each gave you back a piece of yourself. That's self-mastery. Not control over others, but control over emotion. There's strength in not proving your side of the story. Freedom in letting misunderstanding exist. That's Stoicism in motion, not a lack of feeling, but the refusal to let feeling dictate direction. You've stepped into silent power. You don't chase clarity anymore, you create it within. And while you're finding peace, they're losing balance. Your silence becomes contrast, the proof of evolution. They once read your tone, your pauses, your words to gauge control. Now they have nothing to read. The silence that once belonged to them is now your domain. You've learned that emotional control isn't suppression, it's redirection. You're not denying emotion, you're mastering it. You let silence do the talking, because silence, when held long enough, speaks what words can't: strength, boundaries, emotional resilience. They feel that new frequency even in your absence. Your stillness carries silent authority. It's not cold, just undeniable. You're not trying to prove you've moved on. You simply have. That's true detachment, when peace stops being an act and becomes instinct. And the irony, they can feel it, even from a distance. Energy doesn't lie. They sense the power of silence pressing against their thoughts. Every memory of you triggers realization, not longing. They know something has shifted. The one who used to bend is now unshakable. You start to see patterns differently too. What once felt like rejection now looks like clarity. What once hurt now instructs. Growth happens in those quiet, unseen moments when you don't react. The silence they thought would break you rebuilt you instead. That's when you begin to grasp the psychology behind calm. The world spins slower once you stop chasing. You quit defending. You stop pouring energy into chaos that doesn't deserve it. You start moving in rhythm with something stoic, a higher order within yourself. And the beauty of this phase is simple. You no longer need closure. Silence already gave it to you. It dissolves illusions. It exposes who had control and who only performed it. You realize silence doesn't end stories. It reveals their truth. And often that truth is all you ever needed. Your silence has become your voice now, quiet but sovereign. It speaks only when needed. It carries mental discipline even through chaos. You don't raise your tone to be heard. You stay quiet to be understood. You don't chase validation. You embody worth. That's the shift. From reacting to reigning, from noise to clarity. You're no longer waiting for recognition or regret. Their reaction has lost meaning, because once silence stops being about them, it becomes about you, your energy, your peace, your boundary. That's emotional intelligence at its purest, knowing that control isn't dominance over others, but freedom from their pull. And that's when the change becomes permanent. You cross the line between needing closure and becoming it. They're still tangled in questions, but you've already evolved, not through anger or revenge, through ascension. Because silence doesn't just end noise, it changes who you are within it. Eventually, they stop pretending it doesn't hurt. The same silence that once made them feel superior now feels unbearable. Nights grow longer. Thoughts grow louder. They scroll through old words, searching for proof they still matter, but all they find is absence. Real, unmovable absence. That's the mature power of silence. It stops being quiet and becomes undeniable. They tell themselves they're fine, but pride is fragile under the weight of regret psychology. What tortures them isn't your silence. It's what it represents: acceptance. That you didn't need closure. That your world didn't collapse. That you moved on without chaos. That truth burns deeper than anger ever could. Because anger connects, indifference frees. They feel that indifference now. The coldness they used to fake has become real in your hands. You've become what they pretended to be: calm, composed, detached. That's silent dominance, and it's devastating because it forces them to face the one thing they always avoided: themselves. When you chose silence, they thought you were waiting. They never realized you were healing. Each day without reaction pulled you further away. And now, your distance isn't revenge. It's rebirth. The power of absence stripped every illusion bare. What remains is truth, quiet, final, inescapable. They'll test the door again, a message, a memory, a random emoji meant as bait. But this time, your silence doesn't come from control. It comes from peace of mind. You've accepted what they can't. Silence doesn't end connection. It ends illusion. You don't need to prove worth to someone who couldn't recognize it standing right in front of them. That realization is what finally breaks them. The ego collapse they feared arrives quietly. No explosion, just a slow unraveling of certainty. They begin to understand that silence isn't absence of care. It's the boundary that defines what care should have been. The space they thought would keep them safe has turned into a mirror they can't escape. And in that mirror, they see it all. How manipulation replaced honesty, how control turned into fear, how every cold response returned colder. The universe has its symmetry. Silence doesn't punish, it reflects. You always receive what you gave, multiplied by time and truth. You've learned what they still haven't, that silence, when held with intention, is the highest form of communication. It doesn't scream for attention, it commands it. That's Stoic wisdom. You don't explain peace anymore. You live it. You've built strength in restraint, inner strength that doesn't need to announce itself. They thought silence would make them powerful. Instead, it exposed how fragile their control really was. Because the illusion of dominance only lives when someone keeps reacting. Once you stopped feeding the cycle, their entire structure collapsed. That's the final stage of detachment power, when the game ends because one player simply stops playing. Now they feel what you once did, the echo of silence in every thought, the uncertainty that keeps replaying moments, the gnawing wish to undo what's already gone. That's silent justice, no words, no revenge, just the quiet truth that peace always wins in the end. And as they sit staring at the message thread that no longer moves, they finally understand. Silence was never about distance. It was about revelation, about who held true control, about who could live without noise, about who was strong enough to stay still. You didn't break them, the silence did. And maybe that's how every cycle ends, not with chaos, not with closure, but with calm. Because when silence strikes back, it doesn't shout. It just shows who mastered it and who never could. Silence is where everything changes. It's the moment the noise fades and you finally hear yourself again. The moment you realize peace isn't born from explanation, but from restraint. People think silence is emptiness, but it's not. It's transformation. It's the space where clarity grows and illusion dies. Every message you didn't send, every time you held your tongue, every moment you chose not to defend, none of it was weakness. It was discipline. You weren't losing connection, you were reclaiming control. That's Stoicism in practice. Not about feeling less, but about mastering what you feel until emotion becomes direction, not distraction. They thought silence made them powerful, but silence in the hands of someone calm is different. It's psychological power. It doesn't chase, convince, or explain. It just stands, steady, unmoved, untouchable. That's silent power. Now they feel what you once carried. Confusion, overthinking, the slow ache of uncertainty. That's the power of absence. When you withdraw your energy, the entire dynamic reveals its imbalance. That's not cruelty. That's balance returning home. You didn't disappear to punish anyone, you disappeared to protect peace. Because silence isn't weakness, it's awareness. It's choosing not to speak in a world that confuses noise with value. It's knowing that you don't need to be understood to stand firm in who you are. And somewhere along this road, you stopped waiting for their message. You stopped wondering what they think. You realized peace isn't something they can give. It's something you decide to keep. That's self-mastery. That's inner strength. This is the moment the game ends, quietly, without revenge, without drama, because silence doesn't destroy to win. It reveals. It shows who depended on noise and who found clarity in stillness, who needed attention, and who learned meaning through absence. Now you stand where few ever reach, as in control of yourself. You've turned detachment into power, distance into clarity, absence into presence. That's the paradox of Stoic wisdom. The less you react, the stronger your presence becomes. They'll feel it, even without words, especially without words, because silence lingers long after sound fades. It's not revenge, it's consequence. The echo of everything they took for granted, multiplied by time and truth. So take a deep breath. You've already done the hardest thing, staying still when every part of you wanted to explain. That's discipline. That's what separates peace from pride, wisdom from impulse. You've stopped chasing closure because you've become it. If this message resonates with you, if you've found strength in restraint, if you've learned to lead with calm instead of reaction, then you understand what this space stands for. This channel exists for minds like yours. For those who rebuild quietly, rise without noise, and choose silence not as escape but as evolution. If you want to help strengthen this message, tap the Super Thanks button below. Not as a donation, as a declaration. A way to expand a movement that values calm over chaos, clarity over confusion, silence over noise. Every act of support helps this voice reach others still learning that peace is power. Before you go, and subscribe if you haven't yet, share this reflection with someone who needs to understand what silence really means. Turn on notifications, because what you feed your mind becomes your peace. Remember this: silence doesn't take from you. It returns what was always yours: your dignity, your time, your power. And when that happens, the silence that once hurt becomes the silence that heals. It becomes proof that you no longer need to be loud to be powerful, because sometimes the loudest transformation happens in complete quiet.